Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come out and spend a little time with you and familiarize you with the International Military Student Program as it's conducted at Fort Leavenworth. I've got a number of slides. I'm going to try to work through these slides fairly quickly and then take some opportunity to answer questions or share any insights that you may want to have associated with this. So with me tonight is Mr. David Bourne. Dave directs our field studies program, and we'll talk a little bit about that, about the mission of my organization and Dave's role in that. His very critical role as it pertains to sponsorship, because he has the overall responsibility for our entire sponsorship effort, and he has the direct responsibility for the Fort Leavenworth sponsors. So Dave has a really critical role. And it is, in fact, our sponsorship program that perhaps, as much as anything else, sets this program apart in its uniqueness and in the way it's viewed around the world. So go ahead, next slide, Dave. So I just want to share with you a few of our regulatory authorities for conducting this program. So all of our guidance is either congressionally mandated, or it is something that's done at the Department of Defense or the joint level. How many of you are former military or spent some time around the military? Great. Well, the point of this is that none of our controlling regulations are local. This is an enterprise level program that belongs to the State Department. It's executed by the Department of Defense, and then at individual locations, we are obliged to conduct the program in accordance with those constraints. So I always want to share that up front so people don't think that, Jim Fain is sitting in his office diabolically thinking up things to do. And so the reason we do these things is because Congress tells us to, and the State Department and the DOD tell us to do them. Now, having said that, most of those regulations were derived from a standard operating procedure that was produced at Fort Leavenworth. Because we are the home of international military training, it all started here in 1894. It's the oldest program of its type. It's by far the largest program of its type. And so as a result, we have a significant amount of reputation to uphold, and we're given quite a bit of latitude in how we conduct the program. But we can answer specific questions on that if you have them. Next slide. So the mission of the International Military Student Division, which is the organization I have had the honor of leading since 2003, is the comprehensive administrative support of the international military students and their authorized family members who accompany them here to Fort Leavenworth. And it's very important that I stress authorized family members, because again, this is a very specific type of program, and it's not something that's done informally. So I'll talk a little bit about some of that later. So to give you an example of the comprehensive nature of our responsibility, I have HIPAA authority. I look at people's medical records. I get involved in disciplinary issues. We pay about 75% of our international students a subsistence allowance while they're here. My office does that. We get involved in everything from, if something happens with local civil legal authorities, we're involved in that. So we have the comprehensive responsibility for these officers and their families while they're here. On the academic side, we are responsible for the creation and conduct of a preparatory course that assists the officers in developing the skills they're going to need to succeed here. The Commander General Staff Officer course, I sometimes refer to it as Academic Ranger School. It is probably the most challenging academic course that the United States government, military anyway, has. It is a graduate level program. Our officers do comprehensive examinations, both written and oral, and the international students have to perform at the same level as the U.S. Army students. For some of them, that's not as much of a challenge because they come very well prepared themselves, but for some, especially those who are challenged with their English language proficiency, it is very, very, very challenging. We also, our methodology is the adult learning model, small group instruction. So instruction in the Command General Staff College is what sometimes is referred to as flipped instruction. It's actually the students that are largely responsible for the day-to-day conduct of courses. They're going to be given readings to read. They may be given practical exercises. They may be taken somewhere and given something that we refer to as a concrete experience. And then they have to, in a facilitated environment, argue that out, bring their own experience to bear, bring in other reference material that they've researched on their own, and conduct that and synthesize that against whatever the terminal learning objective is for that block of instruction. And because it's graduate level work, no grade below a B- is recognized, right? So the first time a student gets a C, they're in academic probation, and their life's going to be rough the rest of the year. So it's tough. It's a very, very tough course. We held the graduation board today. We started off with close to 1,200 students totally. We're going to graduate 1,080. Fortunately, we didn't lose any international students to academics or misconduct. We did have some U.S. officers that were lost to misconduct. We had some U.S. officers that had to withdraw for compassionate reasons. And we had one international student, our international student from Ukraine, who was recalled to go to the war. But he will graduate from the course, and he may, in fact, I'll talk about this at the very end because there's some curiosity out there about some of our students that I want to address. He may, in fact, get his master's degree, but he still owes us a paper. So, he's been given a year to produce that paper. I've recommended that he just write on a big note, "I passed my practical exam." So he went home, he's promoted to colonel, he's commanding a regiment in Kyiv. So this is real stuff. The Field Studies program is the second part of our organization's mission. That's Dave's primary job, is actually to plan, execute, and conduct the Field Studies program. The Field Studies program is a congressionally mandated program that requires us to expose the international students as broadly as possible to all aspects of life in the United States. And we do that through exposure using planned events that cover 11 different facets, and we'll touch on those a little bit later. I'll let Dave talk about them. But one of the important facets is a facet called American Life and Diversity. I may have gotten the word order right. Diversity in American Life. That is a critical thing for us because it is in fact that facet that allows us to support sponsorship. We have rolled sponsorship up into that facet, and it is what allows us to actually spend money in support of sponsor recruitment, sponsor retention, and sponsor appreciation. So again, you all are part, you and the other two sets of sponsors we'll talk about in a minute, are part of that program. Next slide. So this is the wire diagram. It has to be in every military briefing. You've got to have one of these. So the big boss is our 3-star, the Commandant, currently Lieutenant General Martin. We just, in the last week or two, got a new Deputy Commandant, Brigadier General Dave Foley. He's on board and is excited and really has spent some time with me talking about the international program. He's going to be a huge supporter. And then on Fort Leavenworth, we have the various school directors that we have international students as part of the course. Your focus will be on what most people refer to as CGSC, or the Command and Drill Staff College, more specifically the Command and Drill Staff Officer course students. Out of the 140 students that we anticipate coming in next year, 123 of them will be in that course, and that is in fact the course that we ask for support from sponsors to help. There's some smaller courses. One of those is a course for a select number of Command and Drill Staff Officer course graduates who get selected through a competitive selection process to stay for a second year of school. So in the current class, the class is going to graduate at the end of the week. 14 of those officers, 14 out of 113 officers were selected to stay for a second year of school. So some of you are sponsoring probably students right now that are going to stay for a second year. We do not continue formal sponsorship into that second year. The assumption being that by the time you've been here a year, you pretty much should know your way around. You really don't need that. Now, that doesn't mean the friendship doesn't continue, and we certainly expect that. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite Fort Leavenworth sponsors years ago once told me it's only sponsorship for about the first 2 weeks, and then it's friendship, right? So if you're one of the folks who's sponsoring, raise your hand if you're sponsoring a student that's staying for SAMS. So see, you're in the room. So great officers, they very, very tough competition to stay, and so we're proud that they're staying on for a second year. What we need you, though, is to help these new students, these folks that are here for the first year, to kind of help them find their way in the community, feel part of the community. We could set these officers in a classroom and talk to them about the United States for hours on end, or we can just turn you loose with them and you magically expose them to all that's great about this country. So that's why we're so fortunate to feel so blessed to have you as our partners. You'll see that the organization is kind of divided into two sections, an administrative section and an MSP section. So on the left side, Mr. Adam Escobedo is my deputy, and he's our lead for admin. Those folks are the ones that are working behind the scenes every day to make sure that our international students are being paid. If they have any issues with a landlord, or if they're having any kind of life support type issues, they need doctor's appointments, their children need immunizations for school. That's the team that's working on those things. Dave and Dave's folks are out there researching, planning, executing, and coordinating the 35 to 40 discrete activities that we're going to do over the course of the year to expose these guys to life in the United States. And then, of course, also working the sponsor coordination piece. Next slide. So, with graduation on Friday, we will come very close to 8,500 graduates from 166 different countries. As I mentioned, there is no cooperative military education program anywhere in the world that has any numbers that look anything close to this. This is probably one of the most well-known and best appreciated strategic engagement tools that the United States government has ever had. And we're caretakers of that. And again, part of what has varnished the reputation of this program is sponsorship and all that you all bring to that. I'm very good friends with the guy who does the same thing at the Army War College. So we're going to get the students in June. And early August, they're going to start the course. And sometime around early August, he's going to call me, like he does every year, and curse me out on the phone. Because he's going to have 12 or 13 now colonels, maybe brigadier generals, who anywhere from 8 to 10 years ago were in this course here. And they're lined up at his desk to tell him how they don't know what they're doing there, and how they don't know how to support students, and how they really need to do better with sponsorship. And so then he calls and yells at me. And I say, suck to be you, doesn't it?
There you go.
Everybody they're more important than anything else, right? So, again, most comprehensive program of its type anywhere in the world. Next slide. I always like to show this slide, especially when we have visiting academics from the civilian world that come to the college. There is no Ivy League, you name it, university in the world that wouldn't love to be able to throw a slide up like this. To have 27 alums that have become heads of state, presidents, prime ministers, or in one case, king. Now, I show you that, we're very proud of that, and we're very proud of our part. But the real takeaway from this slide is it is the best evidence I could offer about just how seriously our international partners take the selection of their students and the investment they make in sending those students to Fort Leavenworth. They can send their officers anywhere in the world they want to send them for staff college. They can go to the UK, Australia, China. They can send them anywhere. They send their best here. And it shows. Because when they go home, they very quickly move into very important positions, and over time, many of them rise to the most important positions within their home government. I like to show this slide. So for our present company accepted, we do have American general officers in the room. But most of the U.S. Army officers and the Command General Staff Officer course, there's about a 2% chance of them making general officer. Our international students, it's 50% or more are going to make at least one star. So I always tell the U.S. students, when you're having a cup of coffee with your international student, one of you has a chance to be a general, and it's not you. But many of these guys, small armies, talent management is really, really something they can do, and they do it very well. So on this particular slide, these are 3 current sitting heads of state. So from left to right, the King of Bahrain, the Prime Minister of Singapore, and the President of Rwanda. Next slide. Okay, this is the current class. I'm sorry, no, this is our class that's inbound. I did want to share this. So we're going to have 140 total students, 123 of them that you're going to help us with. And I always like to show this. We break up the class by the geographical combatant commands from which they originate. And the reason I like to show it that way is because that is in fact how they're chosen. We don't choose the students who come. Our geographical combatant commanders, so the 4-star generals that are responsible for each of those areas, annually host a meeting within their combatant command, and they take in requests from the U.S. embassies in those countries for seats in our course. The combatant command then looks at their strategic priorities and they decide who they're going to invite. So once they've made that decision, that goes up to headquarters, Department of the Army, and our Chief of Staff of the Army reviews that. There might be a few changes on the edges if the U.S. Army has any special concerns in an area, but generally the combatant commander's input is probably going to be accepted, and that's ultimately what becomes the invitation slate for the Command General Staff Officer course. Once those 123 students arrive, very shortly after they arrive, and probably when you talk to them for the first time, they're going to ask you about SAMs, because that's the first question in some of their minds is they haven't even had day 1 here, but they're trying to figure out how they get to stay for a second year. So some number of those students in this class will start through the competitive selection, and then Usually right after Thanksgiving time frame, we'll make the announcements of who's going to stay for the second year. Those green, apologies for anybody that's red-green colorblind and can't see this, but the 14 green named or countries up there, those are the students who were selected for SANS. And then the 3 blue are officers that are selected and invited for a senior service college. We actually have a war college program for only 3 students. And it's always a student from Canada, Germany, and the United Kingdom. They come in for 1 year and they do that course. The students from Canada and Germany stay and become instructors. The Brit typically goes to an assignment in DC, either at the embassy or somewhere on the U.S. Army staff. Okay. When I took over the program in 2003, we probably had 4 African officers and maybe 6 officers from the Indo-Pentagon region. You'll see the numbers are significantly different now. First of all, we've grown the program from 90 officers. Our invitation slate is actually 130. It's always hard to hit that because things happen. Coups happen in a country. Once there's a coup, the U.S. government no longer supports students from that country in our programs. Natural disasters happen. Some of these armies are small armies. Students don't pass their initial English language proficiency test. It's very hard to hit that actual 130. So right now, if everything goes as planned, we'll have 123 students in the course. So you might ask why the big numbers for AFRICOM and Indo-Pentagon. Quite simply, we're trying to counter Chinese influence in the world. It's that simple. China has supercharged their efforts on the continent of Africa with foreign direct investment. The Belt and Road Initiative, if you're tracking that or familiar with that at all of their neighbors are becoming ever and increasingly more indebted to them. And this is one of the ways that we're trying to counter Chinese influence. Because again, our hope is that these officers from these countries, 5, 10, 15 years down the road, will be in positions of leadership and they can nudge their governments in a direction that's more in alignment with the values that the West has and not the values that China has. Okay. Any questions about this slide before we move on? Okay, next. And we're going to send these slides out so you have this, but these are the POCs for my admin folks, and you can see how we've broken out the responsibilities. So let's just say that you are sponsoring the Netherlands. Who's sponsoring the Netherlands? Do we have the Netherlands? Okay, so Mrs. Mary Erickson will be the International Military Student Program Assistant that is directly responsible for the Netherlands. That's her contact info. So should you need to reach out with a question for your student, then that's who you'll reach out to. I'm sorry? An admin question, an administration question. So your student comes to you and you're like, they can't figure it out. They're having problems with their landlord. Now here's the thing. Your students are going to ask you questions that I really don't want you spending a lot of time on. But they're going to ask you because you're their friend and Mr. Fain's scary. Right? So they don't want to come and talk to me because I have resting, whatever that face is. So they'll ask you. So what I would encourage you to do is always, when you're asked a question, your question back should be, have you talked to the International Military Student Division about this? Okay? Because at the end of the day, we're ultimately responsible. We have no other responsibilities. I have no responsibility for any U.S. officer. We're completely and wholly dedicated to the international students and their family members. So let us work issues that they may have. We have decades and decades of experience. We know who the right people are to talk to. We know what the rules and regulations are that cover these things. So instead of nudging your officer in the direction they want to go, kind of herd them back towards us, right? And they will ask everybody till they find somebody that gives them an answer they want to hear. And then off that direction they'll go, and I'll have to pull them back. But I need to stress to you, I love my job. I feel absolutely gifted with this opportunity to do this work. But let me just emphasize, we are compliance agents of the United States government. It is not our job to find ways around the rules and regulations for these officers. Okay? They need to stay inside the lines. Okay? Because when they get outside the lines is when we run into problems. And if they get too far outside the lines, we run into big problems. Okay, next slide, please. I talked about a lot of this. With these local access credentials, I've had some sponsors tell me, you know, it's like they don't want you to come on to Fort Leavenworth. Right, they don't. Nobody wants you to come on to Fort Leavenworth. Things have changed. Times really have changed. Fort Leavenworth, if you've been in it used to be a completely open post. You could drive on, walk around. Going in buildings, some of the buildings were closed off, but the installation itself was an open installation. No longer the case. And it's really become restrictive where international students and their families are concerned. And for a very unfortunate reason. How many people were aware of the Naval Air Station Pensacola shooting in December of 2019? So an international military student murdered 8 people on Naval Air Station Pensacola. That was on the 19th of December, 2019. The next day, the world changed for international students. Their credential that they used to be able to show to get in any DoD installation was taken away. They now get a special ID card that's credentialed only to the training location. So our international students can only get on and off Fort Leavenworth. They can't go down to Fort Riley. If they want to go somewhere else, I have to write a memorandum that establishes their authority to go to that other place. So there have been some very significant changes. And so they've lost escort privileges. They can't bring anyone on post. They can only bring themselves, and their family members have ID cards that allow them to come in too. We have reporting requirements. If an international student goes beyond 150 miles from Fort Leavenworth, that's an Army level report I have to make. So for those of you that have places down at Lake of the Ozarks or whatever, and you want to have your international student go down there with you, just always ask them, hey, does IMSD know where you are? Look, we want them to travel and see the world, but again, if someone gets in a car accident in St. Louis and admitted to a hospital, and we haven't reported that they were there, the questions are going to be, why were they in St. Louis, which is way outside of 150 miles from Fort Leavenworth, and you didn't tell us. Okay? So just help us out in that regard. COVID-19 vaccination status. Currently, so of the 123 international students we expect to have in, 84 of them are already here. They're in San Antonio, Texas, at Lackland Air Force Base, at the Defense Language Institute English Language Center, improving their English. Talked about how challenging the course is. These guys are down there right now, immersed in English language, writing, briefing, developing slides, learning briefing techniques, trying to bring their English language competence up as high as they can before they report here to us. All of those folks are vaccinated. That was a precondition of them coming, so they've all been vaccinated. For the remainder, who are what we refer to as direct entry, those that are coming directly from their home country or overseas to us, they have to be vaccinated or proof of negative COVID before they arrive, right? So everybody should be showing up with a vaccination status or something akin to a vaccination status. They had COVID and proof that they are no longer positive, et cetera. Okay? So we shouldn't have to worry about that necessarily.
Hey, Jim, isn't there also, as an offshoot from the rehabilitation Pensacola restriction on firearms?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for raising that. So how many of you are sports shooters? You like to go out and shoot? Okay. International military students and their authorized family members cannot possess, use, touch, transport a firearm or privately owned ammunition. The only time they can touch a firearm is if it's done in the context of us training them. So at some point we go to Fort Riley and we go to a small arms range and we take them out there and we use U.S. Army military-owned weapons and ammunition. That's permissible. Cannot come to your house and shoot your 1022 or anything else. They have to sign a document acknowledging that prohibition before they come. And if they violate it, it is basis for immediate removal from the program and to be sent home. So please, if you have them at your house for 4th of July, let's get out there. Let's do the celebratory gunfire. No, you can, but they can't. And again, they're authorized family members that are under that same prohibition. And if someone says, yeah, but my wife's a U.S. citizen, okay, you're here. Our international students are here on an invitational travel order with a visa status. The visa status for our international students is A2 or NATO 2. And those statuses are official business of a foreign government. If your officer is married to an American citizen, their status is not, I'm an American citizen. Their status is, I am a dependent of that foreign military officer. And they will have derivative privileges and derivative responsibilities. Okay?
They can use those arrows.
Oh yeah, so crossbows, bows and arrows, that's all fine. We had folks that hunted this past year. There is a bow season on Fort Leavenworth, and so folks that deer hunted, turkey hunted, all that. Crossbows are fine. It's just firearms that go bang bang. Okay. Next slide. Okay. Hey, the next we're going to leave these with you guys. But so of the students coming in, we wanted to share with you, of our 123 students coming in, 70 of them have been offered houses on the fort. 16 have been put on a wait list, and the remainder are going to be living off post at, some of them kind of know where, some of them don't. Let me explain how housing works on Fort Leavenworth for students. We're going to have about 1,200 students come in. There are approximately 550 sets of student quarters. So, you don't have to be a math whiz to know that there's not enough houses for all the students, right? So for 70, at least 70 of our internationals are going to have the opportunity to live on post. Now, please listen closely to what, especially if you're going to be helping your officer, maybe transporting them around a little bit or being involved in that. They're going to be taken to a house. What you see up here are, when it says Went, Old Oregon, those are neighborhoods. So they've been assigned a neighborhood based on their bedroom requirement. They haven't been given an address yet because this is the easiest way to ensure that as they are ready to move into a house, that go to the neighborhood, that house is ready, that's the house they get moved into. What we've learned over the years is when they assign an address, getting the officer to be ready to move into the house when the house is ready to be occupied does not line up. And so you end up having houses that are ready for an officer that's not ready to move in, or you have an officer that's ready to move in, he's waiting 2 weeks on a house. So this is a way, this is the easiest and quickest way to get people into a house. They don't have to live there for the rest of their lives. This is 1 year, right? So they may like the house across the street better, but that's not the house they're being offered. If they decline the house, they might as well go to Platte City or somewhere and try to find a place to live, because they will not be living on the fort. If you decline a house, you're gone. Wait list, I mean, there are several hundred people on wait list.
186.
And they're not going to make it back to them, right? So if you happen to be going around with your officer, look, unless you go in the house, and there's clearly like a dead body there. So anything short of that, don't be the sponsor who mutters, "Oh, you live in here." If your officer turns down that house, they're not going to be living on post. And living on post is by far the best solution for most of these officers. It's gonna preclude them having to get a car, perhaps. It's gonna certainly preclude them from having to get 2 cars. And that's the other thing. Who's looked at used cars lately? There are none. Used cars, that's one of my biggest fears right now. Our officers typically come in, and normally in past years they've been able to find a decent used car. There are no used cars. And if you find one, it's an arm and a leg. I'm very, very concerned about that. We don't have public transportation in this part of the world, right? Some of these guys come from places, most of them have been in their capital cities, they've got public transportation. But so if you know of anyone with a good used car that they're willing to part with, then, you know, put the feelers out there. But again, you know, the days of $4,500 for, you know, the 10-year-old Toyota Camry that you drove for a year and sold it for, you know, $4,000, that's gone. I've tried to help my son find a used car the other day. I mean, cars with $150,000, $160,000, they want $13,000, $14,000 for these cars. It's crazy. Okay? I want to leave this with you so you at least have an idea of where your officer is going, on post or off post. All right? And if there's a blank, that means they're off post someplace that they really haven't talked to us. Now, for those that are going to be either bachelors or geographical bachelors while they're here, there are extended stay motels in the area that are wonderful solutions for these officers. We have to be very careful because I don't want to be perceived as being an agent for any landlord or anybody like that. But Condotels, which is an extended stay place in Leavenworth, for many, many years has been a location of choice for our officers. They provide a shuttle service. It's very close now to walking distance for shopping. So there's a couple of other places that have opened up in downtown Leavenworth, Home 2 Suites, Fairfax. These are suite type settings. We were hopeful that there might be some rooms open up in the hotel on post, but they are not going to be able to make any rooms available long term for our officers. That is going to be the primary temporary lodging location for the officers when they come in until they move to their permanent housing solution. But we'll go from there. So anything to add on that, Dave? Next slide. Okay, so Team Field Studies Program. Mr. Bregman's guys, this is their contact information. Next slide. Dave, you want to talk about FSP? Sure.
First off, Mr. Bregman's not here. My name is David Bourne. He already talked about all this. The biggest thing to take away from this for you is our task is to basically get a minor in American Studies for these officers while they're here. We work around the CGSOC schedule. We work in tandem with them because, of course, they believe they're the primary reason that they're here, but as Jim mentioned, our job is to make sure they grow into great leaders in their countries and they like us. So our job is to present them with a good component of what it is to be an American, which you are an extremely important part of for our program. So these are the facets that Jim mentioned. We highlight the one that's in red because this is how we pay for all this greatness. So anytime the Congress comes down and says, Dave Warren, why are you spending so much cash on these Kansas Cityans? I tell them, diversity of American life. That's why. They take care of it all for us. So the biggest thing for you to understand is all those other facets that we talk about. If your officer comes and talks to you, that's great. You can come and have your own ideas. I don't care if you're a leftist or a conservative or if you're a middle-of-the-road libertarian. Talk to your officer about his experience and give him an idea of exactly what it is in your perspective from your experience, because this is the opportunity to reinforce not only that facet, but many of the other facets, especially when it comes to judicial processes and all of the other goodness that comes with media that we talk about. These things in context are things your internationals want to talk about. And they're going to challenge you. Don't be afraid. Because they sit in their staff group and everybody's in uniform and they're like, hey, Fox News? And they're like, and then they can come to you because there's little risk there and say, hey, I really like CNN or MSNBC or something. And then you can have a conversation about, well, I remember when I was a kid and I used to do this, and there were only 3 networks, and then we have social media. You are able to talk these things with your internationals when you have your interactions. Please do. When we have these events, there's a calendar on this actual spreadsheet. It has all the dates with all the activities that we're doing and what the focuses of the activities are. We basically just use an acronym. So you can actually look at it and say, oh, I see you went to the state capitol. How was the governor? Oh, she was great. And did you enjoy anything? Was there anything about it that you remembered? Yeah, there was something that I had a question about. So those are the things that you can do when you have your opportunities to talk to your officers after these events, and that's why we tell you about them, so you can reinforce these facets for us. This is you in a nutshell. There's a lot of support for these officers. We have 3 different sponsor groups specifically geared to provide them support while they're here for the year. We have a Fort Leavenworth sponsor that understands all the ins and outs of things on post. It's a green suitor or a DA civilian. They are the ones that we go to first and foremost from IMSD if something comes up and there's an issue, just so you know. And then we have an Operation International group that's in Leavenworth, Lansing. Most of them are retirees that just don't want to put up with the base's BS. Or Jim. So they go out there. So those individuals, they're a little closer, they're a little bit more engaging than maybe some of our military folks, because most of our Fort Leavenworth sponsors have a very busy schedule. They're an MCTP, they're a DA civilian, they're at work from like 6 o'clock in the morning until 6, 8, 7 o'clock at night sometimes. So that's why we have the Fort Leavenworth sponsors supported with the Operation International sponsors. And then there's you, Kansas City people to people. Besides getting to hang out with awesomeness like Sharon and Sahib, you are not in the military bubble. When they come and talk to one of us old timers that we retired, we all talk military. Roger that? Good to go. Move out. And if they go into Leavenworth, Lansing, 75, 85% of the people are going to talk exactly the same. They're just going to be older. Then we ask all of you to go, that doesn't make any sense. What are these people really talking about? Here, let me tell you what I'm thinking. Kansas City people to people brings the true civilian flavor to this organizational facet coverage. And that's why you're here, is to talk with those internationals and give them a different perspective. Because I am thankful that most of you pay taxes because I got to do 32 years in the military. You paid for my job. Thank you very much, by the way. Now, vice versa, when they talk to you, you'll have a completely different perspective on things, because most of us looking from the inside out have a lot of different perspectives than somebody that's looking from the outside in. So always remember that with your international officer. Challenge them, ask them questions, and let them do the same with you. Super important. So the other thing I want to highlight is they do have a student ambassador inside their staff group. The only reason the student ambassador is there is to make sure they don't lose their IMS. That's it. Or, ask them, did you understand that? And they'll be like, no. And then they'll kind of explain it to them right there, right in the middle of the staff group. They get 0 credit. If they clean the restrooms, they get a credit. If they go out to Normandy, they get a credit. Student ambassadors don't get nothing. So guess what? Some of them don't really do a good job, right? Because there's really no incentive. They're just like, oh, you're here today? Sweet. And that's it. So we like our student ambassadors because many of them are SF officers or civil affairs, or they speak a foreign language, or they have a foreign spouse. But a lot of them, it's hit or miss because they could be busy too. They're in class at the same time. They're struggling just as much. They've got life going on. So we never know what we're going to get. So again, the sponsors are important. And then the next one is their actual staff group. 16 or 15 with the internationals. Glorious sister service in Army officers of all base ilks that are going to basically talk to them. And guess what? It's very business because they have deliverables to get done. So again, it's a nice group of folks, but you are the people that really make it happen for these individual officers to understand what America is all about. Oh, and then these are my imperatives. If you do nothing else, please look at these when you get the slideshow. I will tell you that the first question that most new sponsors ask me is, how much do I have to do? And my answer is, as much as you can. The minimum is at least once a month, give them a call. Send them an email, make contact with them. Minimum. Maximum is up to you and your international officer. Guaranteed, something that most people don't realize, our international officers are super smart now. There's nobody coming here that lived in a hut, who didn't have running water, who you give them a computer and they're like, what? And you're like, cell phone. No. All of these folks understand what it's like to be connected. They understand the internet. They're on social media. They're super bright. But they could have a hard time in their classrooms. They could be definitely challenged with English. So I always tell sponsors to, curb your expectations. Offer with an open hand what you think you want to do with your international, but do understand their people too. They have families. They have other interests. And they do have 3 sponsor groups, and I hate to say this, but we're all different. We all have different hobbies, we have different likes, you dress different, you talk different. You never know what the international is going to gravitate to. Don't get offended. If you feel like there's not stuff like cooking, just tell Sharon. Sharon is your point of contact. Talk to Zahid. He'll give you advice. I have an expectation that there'll be people in this room that will not have a good time with their international officer this year. Out of 123, there's bound to be a few. It's okay. It's not you normally. It may be the international officer. We have 3 sponsor surveys every year that we ask the international officer, how are things going? We send the feedback to Sharon. She talks with you. It's non-attributional. We're not trying to find out if you're a bad person. We're just trying to make sure we're making the right fit for the future. And don't get discouraged. I have sponsored 10 officers, and I know that there are 2 officers in the world right now who hate the ground I walk on. Seriously. And it's okay. Bob knows one of them. He was a sponsor with me. And trust me and Bob talked a lot because we were working as a sponsor team. Because he was calling me and saying, hey Dave, does that sound right? I'm like, no. Back when I was in the green suit. I'll take care of it. So that's the kind of communication you need to have with your Fort Leavenworth sponsor and with your other sponsors from OI. Talk to each other. They will play mom and dad with you. The few, very few ones that are trying to get over, there's not a lot of them, but they are out there. But for the rest of them, they may just not realize, hey, I'm real busy. I got a lot going on. I'm writing paper after paper. I want to get a master's. I want to be in the Art of War scholar. They have aspirations too. So again, just go at them with an open hand. And don't get upset if they're super busy. Or, God forbid, if they just don't kind of like connect with you. There's going to be another next year and another set of officers. And I guarantee you, the next one's going to be better. It's not very often that we find somebody who gets 2 years in a row with bad officers. When we find that, well, maybe there's other things you can do for the international program. Just kidding. Yep.
Third bottom.
Yep.
Go back. Third bullet from the bottom, expand on that a little bit,
You will choose one of the 3 major sponsor events.
please. Third from the bottom.
Oh, never be taken advantage of. I will use non-attributional. This is just no names. If your international officer says, I'm leaving today, here's the keys to my car, please sell it and send me the money. No. If he calls you up or she calls you up and says, can you meet me at the airport, these two bags that are 250 pounds, they won't pay for them. And I don't have the money for them. No. So if you find yourself where they're asking for money or they're trying to introduce you to their best friend who just happens to live in Kansas City and he's got a great business opportunity for you, no. Come talk with me in the FSP program and we'll take care of it after you've talked to Sharon first. I can't highlight that name. Don't imprint on me or Jim, because even though we're good-looking, nice guys and we love you, Sharon loves you more. And she's the one that will kind of figure out where the information needs to go before it comes to us. Because I know that you saw from the slides before, we're super busy, and it isn't that we don't want to help you, but the first thing we're going to ask you when you contact us is, did you talk to Sharon? Unless it's something critical like, hey, my officer was in a drive-by shooting or something, then of course Jim will take care of it. He'll be like, yes, this is ours, we're on it. Because emergencies like that are different. So if there's any other things on here, you know, the big thing is make a lifelong friend. I've been able to meet 5 of my officers in their home country. 3 times they took me around and they hosted me. And 1 time they actually married me and my wife. Did a renewal of vows in their country. This is an opportunity for you to build relationships that will go far beyond your expectations if you just give it a chance. But again, not everyone. There's a few I wouldn't go see. All the dates are on here. These are some of the key dates. The 20th of June is the report date. That's on the wall. We want you to be an airport greeter. Talk to your other sponsors and say, hey, who wants to be at the airport first? And 2, if one of your sponsor teams says, I'm taking my officer to his house, you need to let Sharon know and IMSD admin know, and the number from Mr. Adam Escobedo is on there, his cell phone, so that we at least know we're not missing an IMS at the airport. Please do that favor for us. We have no problem with you taking them. Just let us know, because if I can't get a hold of you, I'm going to call Sharon and say, is that sponsor taking that IMS home? And she'll say, oh yeah, they told us that they were. So please do take that into consideration. If your officer arrived earlier than the 20th, we can't say no. But they have no access to post, they have no amenities. As far as we're concerned, they don't exist until the 20th of June. So don't get upset at us, because we don't actually take ownership of them from DLI or from direct entry overseas until the 20th. We tell our officers don't show up till the 20th. And inevitably, there's always some that do. And if that's the case and they contact you, as long as we don't know about it, you guys go ahead and build your relationships until the 20th when they get when we see them. The IMS prep course, that is the 11th through the 15th. That's where we prepare them for CGSE. And then, of course, our field studies program events are listed. We have 3 mesters, a summer mester, a spring mester, and a fall mester. There's events that are laden in there. Some are sponsor attendee. Some are sponsor can choose to attend, but they don't have to. and then some are IMS or IMSD only. They're color-coded with a legend. It's pretty simple. If you have any questions, who do you contact? Sure. I'd say Saqib, but he'd say sure too. All right. Here's our summer flow information. We talked about all of this. Our job is to get everybody in houses as soon as we possibly can. That's going to be the #1 sticking point for a lot of the officers who don't have houses. And they're going to come crying your shoulders. Understand this, that we want them in their houses as soon as we can get them in their houses, because then they have a place to live. And we know they're good. So with that in mind, we're as much a partner as you are. So if you hear any negative stuff, contact, and she'll talk to you. And then she'll get a hold of us if there's an issue. But if it's a critical issue that you think needs to be taken care of right now, that's when you can contact Mr. Escobedo and or their admin assistant, and they'll be able to help you out on the fly. The issue is the admins are only there during the day 8 to 4. So anytime after hours, it'd have to be Mr. Escobedo.
Hey, and just keep in mind too, we got 123 internationals coming in. There are 1,100 U.S. military personnel coming in too. So it's not just 123 internationals, it's 1,200 total, right? So Fort Leavenworth is this tiny, small installation that's not really set up to be a surge organization, right? So now the good news is most of those U.S. military coming in already have bank accounts and cars and ID cards, and they're in the medical system. They don't need all that stuff. But they're still moving in and out of houses. They're physically moving in and around the installation. And I just wanted to touch on, because I was asked in the break, why the February to February dates for the LAC. May, June, and July, the Visitor Coordination Center is typically doing upwards of 5,000 applications every 3 weeks. Because every time a moving vehicle comes on post, every time a person that loads vans for household goods, all those people have to process in and out of the VCC. So in order to get our sponsors reasonably accommodated, we've moved that off cycle. Also, most of the big activities, the things that you don't want to miss, are going to take place in that airport pickup, icebreakers during the summer, graduations, flag ceremony. That way you're never at risk of your LAC expiring right in the middle of that. Okay, so that's the answer for why we have offset the LAC application process.
And then this is just a regurgitation. I just want to reiterate, please do, if you can, go to the badge ceremony, which will be on the 9th. It will be live streamed on Facebook. We've sent that out to Sharon. She'll be sending that out to you. If you've never seen one, if you're just a new sponsor starting this year, you should watch it just to kind of see what it's about. It's a great ceremony where they actually earn their official insignia to wear their uniforms for the rest of their life that they're graduating. And then I want to reiterate for the graduation on the 10th, if it's raining, you should not come. If it is outdoors, beautiful, sunny skies, please do come out and enjoy the actual graduation on the parade field. There's plenty of room for sponsors. I know that one of the slides before mentioned that you shouldn't come, but it's okay if it's not raining. If it's raining, there's no space inside the Eisenhower Auditorium for all the students, their instructors, and all of the sponsors.
Graduation parking.
Graduation parking is always at the FCC, and they usually have a shuttle that goes out to the parade.
But typically too, at least in the past, we've been told that on the 10th for graduation is not the time you're going to really be able to meet with your officer.
Yeah. It's fairly controlled chaos on that day. Most of the U.S. students have their cars parked with the U-Hauls behind them in the island in the parking lot, and it's a good way to become a pedestrian casualty.
And most of them fly home on the 11th.
Yeah.
So they're super busy saying about all their things too, and I can totally see where you may be just something else they have to kind of do, but they may not give you the love that you probably deserve.
Yeah, the badge ceremony is focused on them. It's that last real opportunity to spend some quality time with them.
Breakers, those are the dates and the countries that are going to be visiting us. We're gonna send you an RSVP email that you can reply back to. We very rarely send you a direct email. That's not our job. The only time you'll probably get one is if we're trying to get an RSVP for an event. That's it. We don't put that on Sharon to tell us. So the thing to look at for the food fairs, the spring food fairs and holiday dinner dances. We basically take the 5th and the 6th, so Albania through Kyrgyzstan, they will always be the first dates for those 3 events. And then the people that are on the 7th and 8th for the initial icebreaker, Latvia, all the way to the United Kingdom, you're going to be at the second event for the spring, fall food fair and holiday dinner dance for planning purposes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So pretty simple. The only thing that I will tell you, if we have a Ramadan conflict, which I believe we do for the fall food fair, right? All of the international officers that are Muslim or practicing Muslims, they will be on the first food fair, and then we will put everybody else on the second one if we have.
Ramadan,
Spring
like
food fair.
March this year.
I mean, spring food fair. Yeah, I thought there was still a conflict, but we'll make sure to put that out. But anyways, you'll get an email and it'll say, welcome from IMSD, this is Field Studies Program, Mr. Robert Tapia, Mr. Eric Stafford. We would please like you to RSVP. You just reply back to that, I'm coming with this many people, and we'll write it down, and it's good. The only one where you can bring kids is the actual icebreakers. Everything else is just you and your spouse, or if you have an older son or daughter who's 16, 17, 18, and you would like to bring them, that is okay too. We usually get 2 seats, and that's how we kind of pay for the food, okay? But we don't want anybody who's young who needs attention running around crazy during the events, because it kind of takes away from the actual activities. So that's what we ask you to do. So, besides that, sponsor recognition is slated this year for 2 June. So that's when we will bring you to Fort Leavenworth. We will get a 3-string quartet. We will play beautiful music for you. And then we will throw grapes. And you will all sit out in your semi-formal best, and you'll talk to each other and all of your sponsors. And then we will throw accolades upon you, if you deserve it. Which is first year, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30. And just so you know, if you want goals in life, we have a sponsor now that is at 48 years. So you may be underperforming right now. It's okay. I know you can do it. So you'll get to see them and they'll tell you all about it, trust me. So please do understand this has for some been a lifelong commitment and something that they have enjoyed. And I honestly think for them, the arts, this keeps them alive. Because this gives them a purpose and they just love the program. So I'll leave it at that. So that's all the stuff for the Field Studies program. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
On the field study program, on those events, I think 80 events.
Almost 40.
But yeah, can you give me some examples?
I have all 3 of them up there, but we'll show them to you. At the end of the slideshow, I have all the dates on there.